At some point, I would like to cover all of the Stephen King adaptations, but because I just covered The Shining from 1980, I do want to talk about The Shining miniseries from 1997 that a lot of people do not even know exists. A lot of people I've mentioned this to are like, what do you mean they made another one? I'm like, they remade. I shouldn't say remade. That's not what the right phrasing is here. They made another adaptation of the novel because Stephen King wasn't all that excited with how the movie played out to his book. He went and he, kind of put his money where his mouth was and was like, all right, this is how I want it done. This is what I would have liked to have seen. I want to see the book fully imagined on screen. And with a miniseries, you have the time to do that. 4.5 hours of time, that is, split into a 3-night miniseries. So this is part 1. I'll cover part 2 and 3. Maybe later tonight. We'll see. I have a lot of movies lined up right now that I need to watch. So trying to get to them. But these are an hour and a half long each. So they're films in themselves. So now, I think the first thing that I'm going to talk about is probably the thing that most people talk about when it comes to this miniseries. The kid who plays Danny has one of the most punchable faces that you've that you've ever fucking seen on a kid. There's just something. For me, it's his mouth. I don't know. He's got this bowl haircut, yeah, and okay. Is the kid's acting bad? Yeah, mostly. I don't think he's awful. I've seen worse, for sure. So I think it's just poor casting. He's got an interesting look to him, I guess, kind of. Like, in 1997, I can see the casting choice. I can. It doesn't really hold very well. I mean, even if you look at Danny has really dumbass haircut. This and that. That's just a product of the time. So let's not even talk about the hair. But you got to talk about the acting. That is something that matters. And it's not very good. And it's just that mouth. It's just that my teeth are too big to stay in my mouth. His mouth's always like, Daddy, what's up, Doc? Yeah, he's got the, there you go. They were going for Doc. They wanted a Bugs Bunny. What's up, Doc? Oh my God, his mouth. I just want to punch it. I just want to punch a child. Or I guess it's Jack Torrance's job. So now we have Rebecca De Mornay. Now, I don't know many people that would argue with Rebecca De Mornay being a more physically attractive Wendy Torrance. Now, as I said, I have a weird attraction to Shelley Duvall, but Rebecca De Mornay is leagues more attractive. And she's just a stronger character, for sure. One of the major complaints of the original film from Stephen King and other was that Wendy was made into a wimp. And I can see that. I can see the argument. But Wendy does everything she can to protect her and her kid. And in the end, she's successful in that. She slashes her husband's hand with a knife. She clubs him over the head and locks him in a fridge. I mean, her presence feels very wimpy, but her actions aren't. So I don't know. I see the argument because of how she's acting. But anyway, Rebecca De Mornay. Now, I haven't watched this miniseries in a long, long time. I do like it, though. And I am glad that it exists. And the reason that I'm glad it exists is because as a fan of the novel, this is a much better adaptation of the novel. Like, if you're just going word for word, closer adaptation, yes. Is the 1980 Kubrick adaptation a better film? Obviously. I know very few people who would argue otherwise, besides maybe Stephen King himself. But as a film, we know which one's the better one. But as an adaptation, if you're going strictly page by page, this is the better adaptation. And it's really cool to have The Shining almost word for word in a 4.5 hour long film. This is directed by Mick Garris, who has directed a lot of Stephen King miniseries and stuff like that. We've got Steven Weber in here playing Jack Torrance. And I get the portrayal here of Steven Weber is a genuinely sweet, nice, likable guy in this. And so his descent into madness is a little more tragic than I guess we perceive Jack Nicholson's version to be, because Jack, just in his normal behavior, just Jack Nicholson in general, like in his real life, he just has this devious, mischievous look in his eyes at all times. So it looks like he's crazy even when he's just being a nice regular guy. This guy has that, all-American kind of guy thing to him. And so I do see that, I do see the decline is more obvious. And we've got Melvin Van Peebles in here playing Dick Halloran. And, I like it. I definitely like the other version. Scatman's much better. That's an iconic role. It's hard to compare. I'm trying not to do that. I'm just gonna drop the whole comparisons to the movie. So let's just talk about the book. There's much more of an emphasis on the boiler in this. Obviously, the way it ends is exactly like the book. This movie is almost identical to the novel. From my memory of the novel, this is extremely close, which makes sense. I mean, Stephen King wrote the teleplay. He wrote the freaking, the story. He wrote it all. So he came in and was like, this is how I want to see it done. We get to see the hedge animals instead of a hedge maze, which is cool. Of course, some shoddy CGI is used later, but that's not here in part one, so let's not talk about that. We get the addition of the croquet mallet, which will be later used instead of an axe. Okay, I'm comparing. It's hard not to compare, though. And then you got Elliot Gould's Ullman here, which he's a bastard. And I like what he says here about, my staff sees me as a bastard. And he's like, but that's what you gotta be like to run a place like this. My father is a great man. He really is. And he runs, he owns and operates the salon that I worked at for 15 years. You could not work for a better guy. You could not work at a place and have a better boss than him. He will bend over backwards for you. That being said, he gets taken advantage of right and left. And I'm defending him, and I'm fighting, and I'm angry. Our old staff didn't used to do that as much. They did at times, but the newer kids, they come in and they're just like, oh, this guy lets me do whatever I want. This guy, is giving me the farm. I might as well take fucking everything else too. It's very angering. And I get why people are hard on their staff. Like, you've got to find a balance. I've talked about this till I was blue in the face, but life is all about balance. Everything has to have the right balance to it. A little too much or a little, not enough puts things out of alignment. And then, you're kind of in chaos. And my dad is too nice. And other bosses are too much of an asshole. And if they were to find somewhere in the middle to meet, like being stern versus being a dick, but also, treating your staff like people, like human beings, that would be a good thing too. So I get where Ullman's coming from, and I understand what he's saying, but you don't want your staff hating you either. You don't want your staff hating their job. Productivity goes down like crazy when your staff is unhappy. So you've got to find ways to incentivize them. You got to find ways for them to feel desired, needed in the workplace. So when he's talking about that, I was like, yeah, Ullman, you're half there. You're half there. You're missing the mark. But I get the mentality of it. And this is a very, upper establishment. The whole Jack beating up his student because he was slashing his tires thing. I get that the kid was young, but I feel like that's a natural reaction. If I walk up and someone's slashing my fucking tires, you're gonna freak out. Like, it's just in this moment of rage. Like, did that kid get in trouble? I hate that stuff where a kid just kind of gets away with it, because the reaction of somebody who finds out seems to, you know, it seems to completely eradicate their responsibility as well. It's just like, oh well, we're not gonna, we're not here to talk about what they did. He slashed your tires. You're out a couple $100, and whatever. And the pain of having to deal with it. You probably have to have your car towed as well, or have somebody drive out, or it would be a huge ordeal to have this fixed. And teachers don't make a lot of money, so of course you're not made of money either. So that kid deserved to get his ass kicked. That kid deserved to get punched in the face. Period. Outright. A kid goes and slashes his teacher's tires because he's mad with whatever, grade he gave him or punishment he gave him, deserves to have his ass kicked. There's certain methods to things. And yes, sometimes a hard talking to will work. Sometimes this will work. But when a kid goes to that length, it's time for a beatdown that they won't forget. Jack is writing a play in here as opposed to a novel. I actually have the words, "I want to punch Danny's mouth," written down here in all capitals, because I'm just wanting to just smash this kid's face. Wendy is very acceptant of Danny's powers in here, and that's obviously much different than the novel. And Tony, of course, or the movie, sorry, not the novel. Tony is actually an apparition, a full physical manifestation of form, as opposed to a finger. I know I said I wasn't going to compare, but I've dropped that because it's fucking impossible not to. But this is exactly what I was talking about in my other review. It would look stupid. It would look hokey. Like it does in here. It looks fucking stupid. This kid's floating around. Hey, Danny. And this is in 97. Okay, when they would have had better effects to do that kind of stuff. In 1980, I don't know. I feel like Kubrick could have made it work, though, with his, he's much better director than Mick Garris is, that's for damn sure. We find out that Wendy lied to cover for Jack when he broke Danny's arm. That's no good. That's no good. But, it happens. It happens. I'm not blaming her. It's just, that's the dark road you start to go down. When you start lying like, oh, we fell down some stairs, or, oh man, you see that stuff way too often. It's bad news. Jack just straight up threatens he's going to kill himself if he ever does it again. He's like, one way or the other. And what does that mean? One way or the other. Like, I'm not going to let it happen again. I'll leave. One way or the other. Like, I'm either bailing or I'm killing myself. Having this illness, like having this desire to drink, and unless you're an actual alcoholic, which I've said this many times and I believe this to be true, everyone's addicted to something. Some just so happen to be positive, and some unfortunately happen to be negative. So you might be addicted to, freaking alcohol, drugs, pornography, women, whatever. Those all lead to bad places. And then there's other addictions. Work can be an addiction. You can be a full-blown work addict. You can immerse yourself in that, and that can be good for some people, unless you push it way too far. Which, balance, of course. A workaholic. I mean, that's work addiction, and there's something mentally going on there, where you just feel like that's your self-worth, or you're running away from something, what have you. But then there's positive addictions, or should I say neutral addictions, that may not actually have any ramifications to them, whether they be video games, or a dude I worked with, he bought a different car every 3 weeks for almost a decade and a half, like 15 years, 20 years that I knew, 15 years I want to say, he bought a different car. A different car. We're not talking about no fucking like, Honda Civic here. We're not talking about some Ford Pinto. We're talking about like expensive, nice cars, and he would just trade them in, and then, he'd always be accruing interest and this and that, and he would figure out ways around this and that, and he would go in. He made a lot of money. I mean, with my salon where we worked, my dad was good to his employees. We made a lot of money. And this guy could go out and he could buy these insane cars and come back with a Mustang, Shelby GT, whatever. All these crazy freaking cars. And he actually had to purposely trash his credit. He did this on purpose. He went in and he let cars get repossessed to stop his addiction. But then what did he do? He started going to his wife and begging her to co-sign for him to get new cars. There's addictions to all sorts of things. So anyone who's like, I don't understand why people are drunks. Why can't they just stop drinking? Why can't you just stop whatever you're doing? There's something you're addicted to, I guarantee it. So the whole like holier than thou shit on alcoholics or drug addicts or, womanizers or what have you. We all have something we're filling our time with. And it's sad to watch. It's sad to watch Jack go through this and walks past a bar. I mean, that's another thing. It's so readily available. Now, do I think that they should ban alcohol and go back to a prohibition? Absolutely not. That shit does not work. Not in the fucking slice. Look what happened in the 20s. It's not what's going to work. But it is there. It's very accessible. And in being accessible like that, it's tough. And he has to walk by and that guy like gives him the like cheers, like, hey, and he drinks, and it just looks so enticing to Jack. It's just like, oh. And that's just it. The reason addicts don't quit is because they don't want to. The reason that addicts do eventually quit is because they do. That's what it really comes down to. Because if you really break down what the addiction is, it's because of the desire. And when they're forced to get away from it, whether it be their health or their family wanting to leave them or what all these things are, that's not them wanting to quit. That's them needing to quit. I need to quit because I'm sick. I need to quit because I'm going to lose my family. I need to quit because I'm losing my job. I'm losing my, reputation, all this. That's a need. That's not a desire. Yes, they sit there and they go, I wish I didn't have this. I wish I didn't have this desire. But that doesn't make the desire not there. It's when you wake up and you go, I don't have any interest in this anymore. I really just don't want to drink anymore. That's how you'd quit. Unfortunately, that just doesn't happen for them. So that's why it is always the struggle. And it's sad. It is sad. I was an alcoholic at one point in my life. I drank for about 4 or 5 years. I struggled with it in a sense, because I just drank like a fucking madman to the point where I actually made myself sick. But I always did it because I just wanted to party, because I just wanted to have fun. But then when I realized that I was replacing my emotions with booze, that I was actually saying that I couldn't have a good time without being drunk. I couldn't understand how anyone could have a good time or be happy anywhere without having a drink. That's when I realized, uh-oh. And then I got a DUI, and I had to spend some time in jail because of it. 10 days, not all that big. But in that 10 days, man, I sat in there and I was just like, is this really where you want to go? Like, you want to have kids one day. Is this really the life you want to have? Is this really the road you want to go down? I was looking around at some other assholes in there who went further down the rabbit hole than I had went at that point. And I was like, do you really want to be that guy? Do you want to be that guy? You think that guy's ever going to have kids? You think that guy's ever going to have a relationship? You think that guy? And it just knocked it out of me. And I'm happy to say, I haven't drank in well over a decade. I have no interest in alcohol at all anymore. But I have my other vices. We replace one addiction with another. You drop booze, you pick up movies. You pick up, you drop that, you pick up women. You pick up these things, or you're just like, there's something that you obsess over. Good or bad. Anyways, all right, enough harping on Or trying to act like I'm intelligent or something. Let's see. Yeah, I already talked about all that. In this, Danny can actually physically manipulate stuff. He breaks Dick's light on his car, and he's actually moving stuff around in his room and such. So he actually has a little bit more power in this than he does in the movie, which is interesting. Definitely makes Danny a little more formidable as an opponent for sure. And I like that they actually point out Wendy comes back and she went down into town for fresh veggies. That was something I had just talked about in the first movie where I was like, they never have fresh veggies. Of course, the vegan here would be, where's the fresh veggies, man? How are you going to live without them? How are you going to live without them? But she goes down there for like a month. She's driving down. They have a truck and they actually go down into Boulder and pick up food. So I thought that was pretty cool. Danny goes full on catatonic during his talks with Tony. So when anyone's around, when he's talking to Tony, he's just sitting there, and he's like fucking foaming at the mouth like he's got rabies. Thought that was definitely a little different. Now, Danny does have some moments where in the Kubrick version where he's just like, So I guess it is semi-similar, but this one is much more of like a trance that he cannot break himself from, in my opinion. The way that they show it here, it just shows more like every time he talks to him, it's not just sitting there. It's, I don't know what that was. I don't know why I just made him sound like freaking Trumpy and freaking pod people, but Trumpy, you can do stupid things. And I like how Jack, when he gets too aggressive with Danny, he goes and he sits in front of the mirror and he like berates himself. And dude, any parent out there has done this. You have a bad day with your kids and you say something or you yell or you do something and you just go, shit, I've done this 100 times. Where you just walk and you're just sitting there in front of the mirror like, oh my God, I've turned into that fucking bastard that I never thought I'd be. Oh my God, I never thought I'd be. I always thought I'd be the better parent. I always thought I'd never yell at my kids. I always thought, oh my God, how have I become the thing I've always protested against, the thing I've always been so vocal against. That shit rings true, man. When you're a parent, you always think you know, oh, I'd never do that. That's why we learn. That's why we learn when we're young. Never say never. You have no idea. I always said I'd never get tattoos on my arms. Never. I'd never do that. Sure you wouldn't. And then Jack takes Danny and he's just shaking him. Come on, Doc. And he hits his head against the toilet. That was an accident, but of course, Wendy's on freaking high alert. Jack already broke his arm, and, you know, so of course. The whole wasps in the room thing, when he says he kills the wasp's nest and then they're in her room, she takes that extremely well. The mother of my kids, if I let them have a wasp's nest, she would never let that happen. Never in a million years would she let that happen. But if for some reason I was just like, listen, it's not going to be a big thing. And then there was freaking wasps all in the room stinging the shit out of my kids. Oh my God. She would throw the wasp nest out of the house along with something about the same size, which would be my head after she cut it from my body. Oh my God. She takes, like, at first she's like, I thought you said it was safe. That's it. Then she's just like, yeah, it must have been a defective bomb. Like, it's all good. Not in my experience. People have much different experiences, different people, and this is not a knock on the mother of my kids, not at all. It's just the truth. So, anyways, that's where that ends. So we'll talk about part 2 soon. Adios.